Hello, welcome to the Truth About Real Estate Investing show. My name is Erwin Cito. Quick question: have you gotten your shot yet? I just did at the Costco pharmacy this week. I was a bit early for my appointment. They did take me in early. The pharmacist read me the side effects to expect. I happen to be well informed on the subject as my dad is a doctor. I follow several local ER, ICU, and infectious disease doctors on Twitter. These days, with all the fake news that's out there, I prefer to get my news directly from the source. So I'm spending a lot more time on Twitter lately to get the unfiltered information again directly, getting it directly from the horse's mouth, what they're seeing, what doctors are seeing in their battle against the virus. I've actually posted their Twitter handles in the show notes in case anyone's interested in following them. One of them is an old friend of mine, Suman Chakrabarti, who I went to school with at the University of Western Ontario. We lived in residence together, and I know firsthand how smart he is. He's actually on the local news pretty regularly. He's on CTV, CB24. He's in the Globe. He's in all those places. He was in the Toronto Star just about 2 weeks ago. So yeah. So I follow a lot of smart people. Anyways, so I showed up early at the Costco pharmacy, like 10 minutes early. I get my AstraZeneca shot. I barely felt it, unlike the nose swabs, for the COVID test when they stick that Q-tip up your nose and tickle your brain. Uh, so the shot was actually easier than taking the COVID tests. I waited 15 minutes until they said I could go. And as soon as I got my shot, I'm not going to lie, I got emotional. I immediately started crying. I don't know what came over me, but I think it was just that the end is in sight until we can return to some normalcy. I know it's just a single shot, but I also know that's highly effective, and we're one step closer to see my friends and family, clients, and staff again in person. I cried even more when the Costco cashier asked for payment for my $300 grocery bill. I went a little overboard yesterday, buying some fresh salmon and ribeyes to smoke, 3 dozen chocolate croissants, 5 liters of ketchup. I need 5 liters since I know I'm going to be living a little bit longer, so there's a chance of actually finishing that bottle. As I record this now, it's been just over 24 hours since my shot. The only side effect I've had is the site of my injection is mildly sore. It's so mild I don't even notice it. I even rode my Peloton bike for about 30 minutes this morning without any problem. If anyone's feeling hesitant about vaccines or AstraZeneca's vaccine, you're not alone. I had questions too when I found out that was the one I was going to be getting. I'll post in the show notes as well some online resources I read. And also, like I mentioned, my father is a medical doctor. More importantly, he's a continuous learner. My brother's a biologist. He's actually in the vaccine field, and he is totally geeking out on the coronavirus. He's well researched. Again, he comes from a scientific background, so I'm quite well informed thanks to him geeking out, and thanks for him digging around so that I was able to get one of the early appointments for my shot. So far, and then yeah, we put our health where our mouth is. So far, my mom, my dad, my stepmom, my brother, my sister-in-law, they've all had at least one shot. My mom is actually fully vaccinated now, as she lives in Hong Kong, China. So she actually legally did host a birthday party at her condo with friends who've all been fully vaccinated without masks. Goes to show what is possible with a proper response to COVID. Anyways, back to the subject of real estate. Saturday morning, May 15th, is our IWIN meeting. This month we have James Moneybags Mags sharing how to purchase a foreign vacation property as he owns a condo near the beach in Costa Rica. I'm sure many Canadians are feeling the need to escape Canada these days for multiple reasons. Don't worry, I'm not going anywhere. I still love this country. For the haters, sorry, I'm still sticking around. Also, real estate accountant Cherry Chan, CPA, CA of Real Estate Tax Tips, will be sharing how to deduct the interest expense from your mortgage on your home, which is also known as the Smith maneuver. It's a must-known money-saving strategy for all investors of real estate, stocks, cryptocurrency, stock hacking, you name it. You don't want to miss it. If you're on my email list, you'll be receiving invites once registration opens. To receive my totally free newsletter that tens of thousands of Canadian investors already receive, go to www.truthaboutrealestateinvesting.ca. Again, tens of thousands of people already get this email and they get invited to all my events. To sign up, just go to www.truthaboutrealestateinvesting.ca. On to this week's guest. we have my old friend, Michael Dominguez. He's here to share about his journey to and lessons in his accumulation of 11 duplexes. So these are real estate properties with 2 units, 2 apartments in each one, and he's got a couple of apartment buildings as well. I know we've had a lot of guests in the past who share aggressive, full-time active investing strategy. So it's a nice change of pace to hear from someone who's relied on investing smart and letting time invested in the market do the heavy lifting for him. Michael is here to share how he obtained financial freedom. He's only 55, which is pretty amazing. And he's also here to share some of his not fun, so much fun experiences with his tenants. Again, because this is the Truth About Real Estate Investing show, it is not all sunshine and rainbows. We're here to share with you the other side as well. So from those lessons of not so much fun tenants, Michael explains how and why that's shaped his portfolio the way he is. Note that Michael's also a serial investor. He has multiple streams of income beyond just real estate, which has enabled Michael to pursue his dream of road tripping in his convertible while taking in a baseball game at all 30 Major League Baseball stadiums. Michael also spent the pandemic, after recovering from coronavirus, writing a book called Armchair Real Estate Millionaire, meant for the beginning investor. So I hope you enjoy this show, friends. If not, that's okay. There's always next week. All right. Hope you enjoy the show. All right, Michael, what's keeping you busy these days?
Well, as we've sort of chatted about, my big thing is I've been working on this book for way too long of a time frame. I've been using the pandemic to work for me, and so I've written this book called Armchair Real Estate Millionaire, and I really designed it to be for helping people buy their first, second, and third properties, and because that's really what drove me back in the day, was helping those people buy that first property, and that's where I really wrote the book for.
Mm-hmm. And so you're a realtor. I'm a realtor. Yeah. And before we were recording, you're talking about how like helping someone buy like their 10th, 15th property. Yeah, that's nice. It's not life changing for them at that point.
No.
I'll argue that it's a much easier transaction than someone's first property.
100%. It really is. And it's like if I was helping you buy your 10th or 15th property, it'd be a fun day or a fun weekend or whatever if we go out and buy it. Like I've helped people buy properties where I don't think they were in the property. Heck, they bought properties where they didn't even see the property. And they say, yeah, sure, okay, if it's the portfolio and buy it. Like, what kind of fun is that? And so you reach a point in your life where you say, if I can help somebody really make a difference in their lives, that's what's driving me. So yeah, I'm not as like certain team, the Doors to Wealth team is still very hot and heavy and doing a great job here in the Durham region. And I'm still part of that team, but I'm just not as much in the day-to-day activities as a realtor anymore.
Mm-hmm. We'll get to that in a bit. I want to hear about the story of the journey in a bit. So why the property? Why did you target the book for the person that did to do their first, second, and third property? And why is it so important that they do this? If you can afford an investment property, you're pretty well off already. Like in the grand scheme of things, you're pretty well off. Why do people need more property?
Well, it's a good question. And the other component that's sort of a 1A is there's a generation of Canadians or North Americans that are coming around now, where they're in their early 30s or so, and they've got their high 5-figure or low 6-figure job, and yet they still can't get into a home. They're renting and paying a ton of money in rent. So I have an entire chapter focused on essentially house hacking. The focusing on millennials to get them going, but even so much buying. If let's say they have bought that first place, they are living in that home. They've built a little bit of equity. I would venture to say that probably 50 to 75 to even 99% of their equity or their net worth has come as a result of their home purchase. So if I can help you get to the next level, and like I have a great client friend of mine. She and her husband are in their late 20s. They had a house, they had some equity, and they decided to go out and buy a property, and they actually got to the point where they bought 2 legal ones. They had to renovate them. And then a couple of years later, they actually had a child, and they were going through the financial numbers and sort of wondering and worried about how they're going to pay for their child's education. And then they just almost forgot the fact they had these investment properties. And they said, all we have to do is refinance one of these properties or sell one in 15 years, and my child's education's paid for. I consider that a huge success in changing someone's life. There's people that are talking about retiring 10 years earlier just because of this part-time job, basically, of 5 to 10 hours a month in many cases can literally change their life.
Is it really that easy? Because there's a whole bunch of stuff out there about like, BRRRRs, and you gotta go door knocking, you gotta flyer neighborhoods and stuff, and you gotta buy something really beaten up. You gotta
Yeah.
haggle the seller for a great price, and yeah.
You and I both got our chops from the old Rain days. You and I both started at Rain around the same time. And a lot of my book, actually, you'll find my market fundamentals. I learned a lot from the great Don Campbell, and like I said, you and I were sitting as students at the same time. And I've learned, I've bought my properties where I won on the buy and stuff like that. But the problem is that all these books that talk about making it on the buy, they don't deal with that boring 10, 15 years in between where they got to actually manage the property, deal with the tenants. I've learned that if you buy a quality property in a quality neighborhood, you can actually find quality tenants and then be able to hold on to that property for a long time and have a fairly maintenance-free business where you can hold for 10, 15 years. And it's the time in an appreciating market and with strong fundamentals that can really make the property appreciate in the long run. I own the sixplex in a poor neighborhood that needs a lot of work, and I actually ended up selling it because it was just a pain in the ass. And yeah, I could have a property manager, and I did, but you still have to be dealing with stuff on a regular basis. You deal with tenants not paying rents and issues between tenants. But you own a quality property in a great neighborhood, you're going to like, honestly, my biggest problem sometimes is the tenants don't give us a call when there's an issue because they don't want to bother us. We've got a tenant, we've got one house where both the upper and the lower tenant, they're both lawyers making $100,000 a year or more. And yet they're renting because they can't buy a place right now. But they're incredible tenants to have. And, I can hold that property forever in a situation like that.
Right. That sounds like a pretty sweet deal. And you made a great point there. How you mentioned how they can't afford to buy a house, because even with a household income of 200 grand, I heard about a property, a legal duplex in Kitchener that just went for over $1 million.
It's unbelievable. Like it's great, as obviously the properties that you and I own, we're excited about that.
Yeah.
But you have to think about how that next generation is going to be able to buy a place. It's going to be really difficult.
They're not. And that's one of my concerns about people who don't listen to this show, is they don't consider what's going to happen in the future. Right. Like I've shared this story a couple times, not story, more about, like my parents, we were a single family income home. Right. My parents. Right. And that was pretty common.
No, me too. I was the same way.
Right. And then our generation, very common to have 2 income homes. Right. So now for the next generation, are they going to be able to double their income? Maybe if the kids still live with them.
Yeah, well, and actually, it's funny you say that, as I actually think of the properties I own, in all seriousness, is they're still generating enough rental income that they're covering all their expenses and they're providing money to us on a monthly basis. So essentially, our household has 6 or 7 or 10 incomes, because not only does it have mine and my wife's, but we have a bunch of other different sources of revenue and wealth building that we're generating. Mm-hmm. So, it just, most of our income is now coming from non-humans. It's not like it's me doing my 9-to-5 job anymore. But, I can, other than in our circles, I don't know a lot of people that are doing that. And multiple streams of income has changed my life.
Is multiple streams of income bad for anyone?
No, there's no bad thing.
Because if you think about like 9 out of 10 people who don't listen to the show, I'm gonna guess a lot of them don't have a second income, right? CPP, EI, those things don't count. I mean, I mean,
That's a fallback. That's if you fall down, you got a net that's sort of holding you from falling and hitting the ground. But yeah, other than that, no, you're right. And in my book, I mentioned, I say it sort of jokingly. I think we've heard this before in our brain meetings, but it always surprises me how people own a Land Rover and they still have a landlord, and that's so prevalent, and unfortunately in our society, is that we have, the more money you make, the more debts you pick up.
mhm,
And so it was a focus of mine really over the last 10, 15 years, was to eliminate all my bad debt and just keep getting more and more streams of income.
mhm,
And it was the aha moment was around 3 years ago,
mhm,
where I was running my financial numbers, and I realized that my money coming in every single month met my expenses with a little bit to spare.
mhm,
And my magic number was $15,000 a month that I wanted to generate in monthly revenue.
mhm,
And I do private mortgages, I do option trading, obviously the investment properties. I've got a little money coming in from a small business. And so with everything that's coming in on a monthly basis, I was generating more than 15K a month. And then I was thinking, well, why the heck am I still, schlepping on a Sunday morning getting ready for an open house when I've already hit my financial freedom number? So that was a bit of an aha moment for me.
mhm, mhm. That's pretty cool. Congrats, eh?
Thanks.
Congrats on your success. So what did you do before real estate? Let's because we all did something before real estate.
We all did, yeah.
Did you have a day
Yeah,
job
I
before being a realtor, before being an investor?
I worked for a company called Pet Value Canada,
I've heard of them.
and
They're
I
everywhere.
was what?
They're everywhere.
They were everywhere. I was the franchise. Well, I was first off as a franchise consultant, but then after that, I became a franchise field consultant for them, and then I ended up selling franchises for them at the end. And so I was traveling all across Canada. Basically, they only had stores at the time in Manitoba and Ontario, but I was basically selling their franchises. But before that, I was there. I was a consultant, and so why uh, it it was a great student feeding ground for me to becoming a realtor. I didn't know that at the time, but I just gravitated to these investors from people all over the world that were coming in. They wanted to make a difference in their lives. They wanted to build their wealth, and those were my people. I really enjoyed spending time with people as they were trying to make a difference in their lives and taking chances. And then when I was introduced to real estate as a realtor, within a couple of years, I started working with the investors because I just was the same people. And it was funny. I used to be so sure that buying a Pet Value franchise was the means to an end for them. And I was a good salesman, and I believed in the product enough that my parents bought a place, my brother bought a franchise, as well as my wife and I bought it. For my first wife and I bought a franchise. And then when we got separated, she kept the store and I got my freedom. So we both won. And but then after that, we went into real estate, and I started working with investors. And I said, "Oh my God, if I'd have spent even half the time focused on that instead of helping people buy franchises." And so I just gravitated to the investors at that time, and that's sort of how I became an investor agent.
Right. And then, but if you're working in franchises, was there the real estate component to it, as in like understanding the market, the demographic of the area, the people that live in that area?
100%. And to be fair, my role was, once the franchise had already been decided upon, I did have some interactions with landlords and lease negotiations, but only on a secondary level. But absolutely, talking about growth projections and such like that. Obviously, a smaller market like an Owen Sound doesn't have the same growth potential as a Hamilton or a Barrie. Um, but yeah, you get the idea. It's I was absolutely involved in pro formas and projections, and all these things that we're using today as
Right.
investors. I was using in my 9 to 5 job, making way too little money.
Right. So you understand the importance of a good market.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I think that's often missing from real estate investors is they forget that it's a business,
Yeah.
right? We our customers are potential sellers, sorry, potential buyers down the road, and of course tenants. So you need to invest in a growing market, right? No
Yeah.
different than you probably want a pet value in an area with growing population, because
Yeah.
the more chance that more people will have pets.
It's true. And you know, and actually one of the components in certain markets in the GTA was a real issue because of the large immigration. A lot of cultures aren't really pet buyers. So there's a whole element with that as well.
All right.
But no, it was it that was what formed my thoughts in terms of real estate, which went into this book is you know, just because a deal is cheap, like I saw these things all the time where I bought cheap franchises. I actually bought some undervalued real estate in my early days because that's what they told us you're supposed to do. I got great deals on the buy, but the problem is that I was dealing with this bullshit tenant situation over and over and over again. And even if I cleaned up the property, I did a great job cleaning it up, and I brought in a tenant who saw the photos and just loved everything we did. They were in a market where every other house around it was pretty crappy as well. And all of their children were dealing with the market influences of them, and they were moving out, and I was getting another crappy tenant again. And I thought, there's got to be a better way. And so it was more by accident. I started buying a couple of properties in markets that I would live in, and 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 the experience was completely different. And so all of a sudden, I was paying maybe 20%, 30% more than what my colleagues were paying.
Mhm.
And I went away from the multiplexes, which is what, you know, everyone I'm sure in your podcast is saying, duplexes are boring. You know, I want to buy this multiplex. Well, I'm getting rid of my multiplexes and I'm staying with a duplex. I can own
No
11
kidding, eh?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I can own 11 investment properties in great neighborhoods with, you know, just a few hours a month in work. And every tenant paid the rent through the pandemic. As a matter of fact, you know, some of the tenants were actually reaching out to us. Like we have a real great relationship with our tenant profile, and they're happy to be renting with us. And we didn't get any tenant strikes. We didn't get any challenges. We've got people that sometimes do the repair themselves because it's their home. You just don't get that kind of tenant profile in a multiplex.
So your strategy partly revolves around who the tenant is.
Yeah. I actually, one of the things I mentioned in the book is decide on the kind of tenant you want before you go looking for a house. You want to find a home that actually meets their profile. So I buy in neighborhoods that's likely close to where people are going to work, close to shopping, great walk scores, good neighborhoods. I want to take my 1980s DeLorean into the future, and I want to, in 30 years, I want to know that that street is still going to be a great residential home. And like, you know, who knows what that plaza is going to be doing? Who knows what that pet value store is going to be? Who knows how people are going to be shopping in the future? But I know how people are going to be living in 30 years. They're going to be living in single family homes and in apartments, and like things aren't going to change that much. We're still going to be living that. And I'm going to own the real estate that people are going to want to have.
Mhm. So most investors graduate from single family, detached, duplex to sixplex, 10plex,
Yeah.
12, 15, 30. You're saying that and you've been there
Yeah.
and you've chosen to come back.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Can you elaborate? Like, what was your experience like? So, sorry for the apologies to the listener. I know Michael and I know Sarah, so I know about the stuff that you do multifamily wise. But so tell us what multifamily investments have you done, and what was your experience like beyond
Yeah. So
duplexes?
yeah, it may surprise a lot of the listeners that the first place I ever bought was a sixplex in Coburg, Ontario, an undervalued, dilapidated 6 unit building, which I learned later was actually more of a drug house as much as anything. The tenant profile was very, very poor. And it wasn't in a terrible neighborhood, to be fair, but it was more of an industrial neighborhood. and it needed a lot of work, and I bought it way undervalued. It had been sitting on the market for a long time, and so I managed to get this great deal. I also, I'm in a joint venture with a nineplex in Oshawa as well. So those are my two examples in multiplexes. But in between all that, I started buying the duplexes, and as a realtor, I focused more on that as well. And it just became so obvious. Um, my For me, quality of life was the most important component, and and 80% of my issues, the classic 80-20 rule, 80% of my issues were dealing with the worst tenants. And I thought, well, what if we were to all of a sudden get rid of all the bad tenants? How much would my life be better? And so we decided to sell the sixplex, and the nineplex is being run by a property management company, so I don't have a lot of day-to-day involvement with that. But the two-unit dwellings just did so well, and and actually a couple of the ones that we bought that were in worse neighborhoods, we've sold them as well, and we've just kept the best ones. And we currently have a portfolio of 11 legal two units, and they're, obviously these are properties that are, were, yeah, I bought them at market value back in the day. I didn't make a lot on the buy. So maybe a couple I did, but some you could actually even argue that I paid too much for it back in the day. But I could tell you the one that I had, what, 3 or 4 people say I overpaid for it, is now worth more than triple. We bought it in 2014. So in 7 years, it's basically tripled in value. So, okay, could I have got it 10,000, 20,000 less? Maybe, but who the hell cares? So, and
Michael, you're doing this all wrong. I've heard lots of stuff out there that you need to make money in the buy. Otherwise, don't do it. Don't do the deal.
Yeah,
and obviously you're just lying that all these things are, you've lost lots of money here.
Yeah, exactly. And honestly, it was a revelation. Is in my money, you make money on the hold. That's it's a bit of a different way to think.
Yeah.
Because if you can hold that property for 10, 20 years or forever, if I can have this as a legacy play that I can pass along to my children, like honestly, if I gave my kid $1 million, he'd figure a way of blowing it. But if I can give him a duplex or two that's paid off at some point, like that's the money tree that's going to last for the rest of his life.
And that's how we prevent future generations of tenants. Right. And it's not a bad thing to be a tenant for like short periods of time, but I just want to pigeonhole my family and future generations of being tenants for eternity. You know what I mean?
Sure. It's true. And here's the thing I wanted to share with you, Erwin, and I know you know this, but there's so many mortgage brokers out there that'll tell them they're qualified for X, and then they come back to me and they say, right now a bungalow in Hamilton or Kitchener-Waterloo or Barrie or Oshawa is selling for about $800,000 or so, let's say, or it could be even a little more in this market, but let's use 800,000 as a working number. And they say, well, I'm only approved for $600,000, so I got to buy this cheap ass townhouse in a mediocre neighborhood. And I say, okay, you can do that. But if you were to pretend, right now you're living where? Well, I'm living in a 2-bedroom basement apartment. Let's say you move to your own house and live in your 2-bedroom basement apartment there. Not forever, but for a few years. But now you've got a tenant upstairs in this duplex that's paying you $2,000 a month in rental income. Go back to your mortgage broker just for funsies, and if all of a sudden you had an extra $2,000 a month in income for your house, how would that change things? And a lot of times they come back to me and say, I could buy a more expensive house now. And so now they're actually buying this duplex for, in many cases, a little bit more than 5% down. So you can get something for as little as $55,000, $60,000 even let's say 10%, or that's not quite 10% down. But they buy this place for 55 grand, and then they just hold on to it for a few years, and then maybe in 2 or 3 years they're in a position where they can move upstairs. Maybe they're in a position they can buy another house altogether, and they can rent out the upstairs and downstairs. Like, you're light years ahead of your colleagues.
And I imagine that's part of the decision why you chose to duplex a lot of your properties too, because the writing was kind of on the wall. The potential future buyers would be able to get more financing for them. Then should it be a single family home?
Well, it's, yeah, I don't know if it was necessarily, like, honestly, I'm not smart enough to have had that much of a plan. I just I started working with people I enjoyed working with, and I started helping people, and that's sort of where I gravitated to. Like, I wish I can tell you that 10 years ago I had this proclamation I was going to do something, but no, it's not nearly that sophisticated. It just sort
Mm-hmm.
of evolved that way.
Mm-hmm. So my story was actually similar. The last home I owned, uh, we were looking at a price point of under 600 grand for a home. That's crazy. My wife and I do all right, and that was our price target compared to today. But we were looking in Burlington, which is a pretty nice city, and but then when we couldn't find um, we couldn't find something that suited our requirements, so we bumped up our budget based on being choosing to look for a house with a potential basement suite, so we could
Yeah,
qualify for more financing, and it
yeah.
worked out. And then we our budget went up from I forget high five to mid six, and then we found a house mid six, and then I was able to put down 5%. I put down $35,000 on a $635,000 house.
Yeah, well, and nowadays you can only put 5% down on the first 500, so it might work out to 8% or 9%. And and now some of your listeners might say, well, how am I going to come up with 60 grand? Well, 60 grand is still a heck of a lot less than 20% down, but and I'm a big advocate of going to the bank of mom and dad. And
I don't think
now
you
not
might has
everyone.
much of a choice.
Well, it's you're right, but now this is a lot different than like I was on all-star baseball teams, and they spent a small fortune on me on all my rep teams, and or I'm sure there's people here that are listening that had spent thousands of dollars on dance lessons and some other
Yeah,
things that the money went away, or
yeah, those are
or
all
that
10 grand a year. For how
and
many
that
years?
those hundreds of dollars that I borrowed in university that I never paid back because I didn't have any money. It's not the same as all of that. What we're talking about here is I'm spending, I'm a 28-year-old guy. I'm spending dozens of hours in research. I'm going to investment clubs. I'm learning. I understand what I'm getting into, and hopefully I can bring my parents in on that journey and say, potentially even joint venture with them or do a loan, because a lot of times these parents are now in their 50s and 60s, and they don't necessarily have a retirement plan as well. Having a percentage of a house for your kids, I think, is the greatest gift you can ever give them. In many cases, you might not even have to give them any money. You might just need to take money out of a line of credit and help them out that way. So don't give your kids $1,000 to help on a down payment of a car. Give them 60 grand or a down payment on a house, and can change their life.
Yeah, and go ahead and retain some ownership.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with that. Yeah, sure.
Because there's some people like, oh, like real estate markets are overinflated, blah blah blah. Like not blah blah blah, but
Yeah.
everything's relative. Would you
So,
rather hold cash?
well, we know, yeah, like history has shown us anything is like, and people are saying, well, is now a good time to buy a property? We're in the middle of a pandemic. We're in the middle of this. We're in the middle of that. You pick a year, any year, and I'll tell you, there were people that said now's not a good time to buy. And the reality is the market is the market. It doesn't lie. Supply is what it is. Demand is what it is. And 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 the market, the market forces control it. And so, do you believe that in the GTA, which is the fastest growing city in North America right now, with planned immigration on both the conservatives as well as the liberals, both want immigration? Most of that immigration is going to the GTA. And oh, by the way, we've seen housing prices for new build go up more than ever before as material costs are going up. Do you think that in 5 and 10 years that houses are going to be worth more today than they are, in the more in 10 years or more today? Well, they're just naturally going to go up, not because it's just magically going to happen, but the supply and demand is just going to keep increasing. So if I buy a property that I think in 10 years is going to be even more desirable than it is today, how is that a bad thing?
So Michael, so someone who's brand new. So like like you said, your book is for the person to buy their first, second, or third property. What are they looking at? And what are they looking at in terms of like paint my listener a picture of what is that first investment property like most likely to look like?
Sure. So in the Greater Toronto area, or for that matter, across most of Eastern Eastern Canada. It's not as prevalent in the West, but we're basically buying something that's a duplex or a legal 2-unit dwelling, or one that could be converted to be such. So in the Ontario market, there were a huge number of 1960s 1,000 square foot 3-bedroom bungalows that were built. I'm going to use that as my example. So again, is this the kind of house that you see on HGTV? Of course not. It's not that dream house open concept. It's a 1960s bungalow, maybe even kind of dated. But what it also has is the side door entrance that if you go up a few steps, you go into the upstairs, and if you go down about 8 steps, you go down into the basement. Well, that side entrance is absolutely spectacularly perfect for the duplex. And so you can go downstairs, and this basement height might be 6.5 to 7.5 feet high, but you can build a separate suite. Yeah, it's going to have shared ductwork and a lot of shared electrical and utilities, but for the most part, it's going to be a totally separate dwelling unit that's completely severed from the rest of the home. And this bungalow, obviously, if it had 1,000 square feet upstairs, amazingly enough, it has 1,000 square feet downstairs as well. And so you can build a nice quality 2-bedroom basement down there. And in many cases, you could, you're only limited to your own ideas. You could make that place look like any upscale Toronto condo. You can make that into an incredible apartment. And now you've got yourself a legal 3+2 bungalow, and you've got yourself a property that's going to likely in today's market generate as much as $2,000 a month in rental income plus utilities upstairs, and another $1,600 or so in the basement. So if, let's say, you choose to occupy one of those 2 units, you've got a tenant in there that's basically clamoring to get into this quality property, and they're going to be pretty happy there.
So your suggestion is for most people to, the term is house hack. Remember when you and I started looking at real estate? House hack, I only think came up like 2 years ago. But yeah, live in your own rental property.
And honestly, the term house hacking is a fun, cool term. But if our grandparents and great grandparents used to house hack, they just didn't call it that, right? It's like I can tell you, my wife's parents, they owned the house, and they lived in a few of the rooms. And they had boarders, and they divided off a section of their home, and that's just what you had to do back in the day because they didn't have a lot of income. And so it's not a new concept by any stretch. It's just sort of been rebranded. And in today's market, like you said at the outset, Erwin, is gone are the days where, like, my wife, my mom worked at home. My dad was self-employed in the appliance repair business, and my mom answered the phones and dealt with the day-to-day stuff at the house. But really, they had one income. And gone are those days. It's harder to make that happen. So you got to come up with a second income. And if this getting $2,000 a month for my upstairs tenant isn't so bad.
And that's, what about, are you guys doing third units yet?
Yeah, and I sort of talk about that a little bit on the book as well. There are certain markets across North America where you can, in fact, add third units. I know in Ontario, in the Barrie area, that's a legal possibility. I have an entire chapter that I talk on, which is actually sort of I even identify it at the front end. It's contrary to the rest of the book. It's I believe there's a deficiency in North America in housing. It's called the missing middle, and we have a number of single family homes. As a matter of fact, there's a lot of neighborhoods that have 60, 70, 80% of the homes being single family. And then the only multi-unit buildings that are being built are these massive apartment buildings and condos. Well, there's those duplexes, triplexes, stacked townhouses, that type of stuff. And taking a house that's the same size as a single family home and turning it into a triplex is something that's really, I believe, necessary. There's the state of Oregon actually has led the charge across North America with, they've basically turned everything that was once single family in the ability of turning it into a triplex or so. It's called upzoning. And I think that that's going to be the future. I know California is trying to do the same thing. Ontario's been talking about it as well. The current or the previous Liberal government, and even the Ontario or the PC government is now talking about doing it as well. I think it's absolutely essential that we do that because we're seeing huge immigration. Meanwhile, we're seeing a massive push against sprawling, or and taking out environmental areas. So we can't knock down any more trees. We can't, and we're adding new people. Where are these people going to live? Well, they've got to live in duplexes and triplexes. So I think that's the future for sure. So I don't know if I answered your question, but that's sort of, I'm a big passionate person about middle housing.
It makes sense to, because if they just update the bylaw, zoning and bylaws, then the private industry will create more housing.
Yeah, it's really there's a huge I don't know if anybody, well, most people in this group have probably heard of it. It's called NIMBY, not in my backyard.
Yeah.
And there's a huge component of people that are sort of saying, hey, when I bought my house, it was a bungalow or it was a house at a nice residential neighborhood. I don't want things to change in my idyllic Mayberry RFD neighborhood. Well, meanwhile, things are changing all the time. Actually, I mentioned this in my book as well, where my wife's parents bought a house on a street in Oshawa. When they bought it, it was actually a dirt road. About 15 years later, it was paved. And then about 10, 15 years after that, it was decided that that was going to be one of the roads off of the 401. So it became a major thoroughfare. Then about 10 years after that, it was turned into a 4-lane road. And then shortly after that, it was one of the offshoots off the 407 as well. So like this is a major highway now. But in all that 50 years of time, it remained a single family residential home. So, and they couldn't have turned it into a triplex, even if they wanted to, even though it's on a freaking highway. And so it's kind of bullshit to think that that neighborhoods don't change. They do. And if we pick busier streets near shopping malls and in bus stops and stuff like that, and allow people to be able to turn those into triplexes and fourplexes, I think that's a great use of our neighborhoods.
Yeah, you're just talking too much sense, Michael. That doesn't work in government. And also, I understand NIMBYism as well. Like people don't want their lives to change or their property values to change. But the sad part of it is that they're influencing what happens to poor people. And if you're the NIMBY, there's a good chance that you live in $1 million house, and then one could argue that you're the rich, and now you're trying to decide what happens to the poor.
Well, it's one thing, like, and I don't know if you really want to get into this that much, but if we look at the genesis of the single family residential suburban neighborhoods, they sort of came prevalent after World War II. In the 50s, the suburbs were born. And so keep in mind, in the United States and even in parts of Canada, there was unbridled racism in those years. And so there was a lot of not in my backyard, we want our own kind and nothing else. And not even racially, but also just social economic classes and stuff like that. And so that's sort of how the suburbs were born, was through just simply not in my backyard. And so 50 years later, I'd like to think we're a little bit more aware of what's happened. And so by reminding people, saying, well, this is why it was created. If you look back to neighborhoods in the 20s and 30s, there was a single family home, there was a big home, and there was a duplex or triplex. And, and it's just, that's how the towns were being built. If you go into inner cities, that's how it was. It's only been since the 50s and 60s that has happened.
So, Michael, you mentioned you have a couple other streams of income. Actually, before we even get into that, before we were recording, we were talking about paths to like 10 million and 20 million and 50 million. And you're a big thinker. Can you talk about what the path is to do that? Like, is it possible for someone starting today investing? Or can you even speak to your own experience? Like, how fast will it take you to get to 20? I don't know. Where do you want to go?
One of my favorite quotes that I quote all the time is from Bill Gates, and people tend to overestimate how much you can do in 1 year and underestimate what you can do in 10 years. And and that was really interesting. And it was when I finally became a realtor, 10, and then I hit the 10-year mark. I had a bit of reflection. I thought, can you imagine where I was 10 years ago and looking at my future self and sort of thinking, this is where I'd be in 10 years. It's crazy. I've got a Zoom call scheduled with some old high school friends of mine for Saturday tomorrow. And we haven't talked to each other probably in 25 years. And it was a post on Facebook looking at my book, and they both reached out to me and sort of said, hey, we should get together and stuff like that. And it'll be really interesting because, again, they're probably not going to listen to this, but, their lives, I'm sure, have evolved as well. But financially, they're sort of living in the same place they were living in 25, 30 years ago. And, they've had life sort of hit them hard a little bit in some cases. And I've had so many modifications in my life. And like, I can tell you, it wasn't that many years ago that I was having some serious financial problems. Like, I used to go to a grocery store and, the debit cards were now prevalent, but I was panicky because I didn't know if I had enough money in my bank account to pay for that week's food bill sort of thing. And I was ready to put a couple of things back because I didn't know if I had enough. So like, I still remember those days where I was really tight on cash. I was never poor, but I certainly was really tight. And so to answer your question, I tell people if you can buy 3 investment properties, and even if you get $0 in cash flow, assuming a 4% appreciation, which is well below what the GTA has been providing, but let's say 4% for a decade, just the appreciation alone plus mortgage pay down, even if there's almost no dollars in cash flow, at the end of 10 years, you've got a net worth of over $1 million after your original down payments. Now, you can argue that $1 million isn't as much as it used to be and blah, blah, blah. But I'd sure as hell rather have $1 million in my net worth today or 10 years from now and have a plan to get there rather than just sort of wing it and see what happens. So, can you get to 50 million and 100 million? Of course you can. But, I don't want people to think too big here. Like if you're sitting with a net worth of $10,000 or $50,000, I can tell you there's a path to get to $1 million. Once you get to that path of $1 million, there's a path to get to 10 million, and there's a path to get to 100 million. You have to decide if you want to take it. There was an aha moment that I had with my wife about a year ago. I was sitting with a financial advisor. It's amazing how the financial advisors start coming out of the woodworks now that I'm a high net worth person, and they start saying, "Oh, we can help you grow, and we can help you this." And meanwhile, they weren't there for me when I was trying to pay for my food bill. But anyway, so it was like a 28-year-old, or maybe he was in his early 30-year-old millennial that basically said, every open house you work, every house I sell from now on, you've already reached your financial freedom number. Every house you're getting now is either going to go towards taxes, going towards your child's towards the will, or it's going to go to a charity. You don't need the money for yourself anymore. You've reached that point. You don't need it anymore. And so, because I always had this goal of $100 million, and then I started thinking, why? Like, if I can do really well with 10 or 20 or 30 million, and then work 4 to 10 hours a week, just sort of managing my portfolio and doing a few little fun passion jobs, that's okay.
Pretty cool. That's why I invited you to have a come golf. You have plenty of time, it seems.
For those that are not, I'm possibly the worst golfer ever, and I was in my head, I was really good at sports, so I used to make my own rules up where if I could throw the golf club further than the ball, I take it to where the clubs landed. So I used to get too angry. I think now if I maybe drank and had a couple of edibles ahead of time, maybe I'd feel a whole lot better about golfing. You never know.
All right, I'll let the bar know when we go golfing. You played baseball. You should have strong hand-eye coordination.
Oh, I can hit it. It just doesn't necessarily go in one direction.
Well, it doesn't for anybody. That's why you bring more than one golf ball. Just don't bring the expensive ones.
Yeah.
Now, You talked about you have multiple investments, and this is what drives me bonkers about certain folks. The people, too many people are binary, either for us or against us. You're either in stocks or you're in real estate, right? There's no gray. You can't. There's no room for both. Seems like you're pretty open minded to any means of making money.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a lot that I'm not doing, honestly, but I'm doing the ones that, like, my goal is to have my money making money without me doing things on a daily basis. I think the quote's been done multiple times before, but if you think of money as your military and it's going out there as soldiers and earning you more, it's winning battles for you. That's what I want to have happen. And so I fell in love with the idea of private lending as a form of income. And for the savvy um, real estate investors, they're thinking, okay, you're making 8 to 12% return on your RSP money. Why don't you give it to me, and I can do even more than that, or do it yourself. You've got the skill set. But there's something really cool about, like, someone like yourself that's an experienced investor. If you're looking to kind of grow your portfolio a little bit more, I would rather loan to you at 9%. Yeah, I could have loaned to some stranger at 10 or 12%, but I'm getting 9% from an all-star investor that's proven to pay for things. And I'm generating with my RSPs, that's basically was in a volatile equity market. I'm getting a solid 9% return, about $6,000 a month in income every single month going into my RSPs. And so now we're starting to pull from the RSPs a little bit. We've got to pay obviously taxes with that, but still $6,000 a month, bang, bang, for the rest of my life. How's that bad? And and then and yeah, I've done value investing for many, many, many years. I've learned a lot of different things from that. I in the
That's
past,
stocks, right?
in stocks, yeah.
Yeah.
And well, actually, it started out. It's funny. I started out with stocks, went to real estate, and I was value investing in real estate essentially. And then I reapplied my value investing mindset back into stocks, because really there's a lot of similarities if you think about it.
Mhm.
And I was a value
Money on the
investor.
buy, right?
Yeah, it's in my mind, like in both cases, I was making it on the whole, because I would buy that. If, let's say, there was a company that I was buying it at a decent fair price and just doing well with it, and then if I hold on to that stock for 10, 15 years, um, I'm okay with that. And if it's providing me with dividends, that's even better. But even if it didn't, it was going up in value, I was okay with that. And so yeah, it's just a little bit here, a little bit there. And who knows, maybe my book sales, I'll make a whopping, $55 a month on that or something. So,
And for the listener, Michael's not kidding. Like, there's not really money in selling books.
no. I was joking. I said I have to sell about 1,500 books to be the equivalent of selling one bungalow. So I'm certainly not going to be doing this for the money, but if I can help out 1,500 people, I would consider that a win. That's for sure. So
So, Michael, I remember reaching out to you about around this time last year because I heard you weren't feeling well.
yes.
Can you talk to why you weren't feeling well?
Well, again,
Because there's
I'm
still
not.
some people who don't believe this stuff is real.
I'm not going to get into the political things, but at the time, I never did find out officially that I had COVID. But I was one of the first that really got knocked on my ass, and so what happened was I had all the symptoms of COVID. And keep in mind, in late March of 2020, we were seeing what was happening in Italy. All the stuff that was happening there. It was a lot of the scare stuff that was happening in the media. So nobody knew what was really going on. But I was dealing with a fever of 104 and total body aches and everything else that I'd had. And but nobody would diagnose me. I wasn't allowed to even get a COVID test. So do I know definitively that I had COVID? Of course not. But do I know? I know. I definitely did. And again, I was out and about, as a realtor would be, or as a salesperson would be, as an investor would be. I was in every meeting in the world, shaking hands and kissing babies and hugging and stuff like that. So it's likely that through my connections I did. So no, it did knock me on my ass, let me tell you, Earl, for sure. Thanks for asking, by the way. I appreciate it.
I remember you saying it was like 3 weeks or something.
Yeah. Yeah. I was out for about 3 weeks, and I'm the type of guy that in the decade prior, I probably had about 8, 10 sick days in my last decade. And so for me to be out for more than a week, and it's funny, even during all that time, I was still taking an investment course because like my brain was shut off, but I'd work for like 3 hours and then I'd say, okay, I'm done.
I remember one of the first things you said was, "I'm pissed off because I missed out on all these great deals in the stock market."
Yeah. I didn't have the brain power to think about it. I just didn't come up with it. It was weird. Like my brain was foggy is the best way I could describe it. But if anyone's ever had a fever of 103, it's hard to be investing in equities at that time.
It's hard to function, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, I've had the flu. I'm sure most people have had the flu, but this was 3 weeks. Like,
Yeah.
gee.
Yeah. So no, I missed out. But you know what? There's always other opportunities, but you have to take the action to make it happen. Like that's the believer that I am. Is you got to make it. You got to make your breaks, as far as I'm concerned.
Amazing. Hey, what's the name of the book? Do you have one there with you?
I have one book right now. The rest are coming out shortly. I'm going to show it to you guys. It's called The Armchair Real Estate Millionaire. And I really picked Armchair because I wanted people to know that you don't necessarily need to have 30 and 50 honestly, if you decide you want to do that after at some point and be a full-time investor, awesome. I'm excited for you. I know a lot of people who are that are full-time investors. But if you want to have if you want to help have real estate fund your life and not run your life, then certainly finding properties that can essentially manage themselves and just simply provide you with income on a monthly and annual basis, then certainly buying quality properties in quality neighborhoods is the way I would advise you to do it.
Mm-hmm. And then, Michael, you mentioned you're not working that many hours a week. What are you doing the rest of your time?
Well, I'm enjoying my life. Like I'm not traveling as much right now for obvious reason, but yeah, I have actually been taking a number of equity courses. The last few months has been more focused on getting the book ready, of course, but I'm planning this summer on doing a summer of Michael tour and just really enjoying myself. And I've got a Corvette convertible that I'm planning on taking out to, if assuming they let me across the border, my goal this summer is to drive across Route 66 from Chicago to California, and just experience towns along the way, just driving on my own and just enjoying life and doing what I want to do. I want to, again, it sounds like a Willie Nelson song, but meeting people I'll never meet again, sort of thing, and just experience life. And it's nice to be in that position. I turned 55 last year, so it was kind of a bit of a freedom 55 of sorts.
That's pretty awesome. And Michael, before the pandemic, you're big into football and baseball, right?
Baseball's my number one. Yeah, baseball.
Weren't you attending? Did you attend the World Series or something?
Yeah, yeah. Actually, my goal has always been to see every Major League Baseball park. I'm a Dodger fan, and so when the Dodgers were in the World Series in 2017, I drove down, or I flew down to California and watched the Dodgers play at home. I've
In the
seen
World
games,
Series.
World Series, yeah. I've seen games in Tokyo and Cuba and Puerto Rico. I've been to every World Baseball Classic game or season, not every game, but every year I've been to some place in the world watching baseball. Yeah, I enjoy going on road trips just to see baseball games. I'll even combine, like I'll say, honey, why don't we go on a cruise? And the cruise starts in Miami. And oh, by the way, we'll watch a couple of games in Miami at the same time. So she's willing to go to the games in Miami as long as she goes on the cruise in the back end.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of worked out well. So no, I love baseball. I really do. And as a matter of fact, even on this trip, my plan is to sneak off Route 66 and make it to Kansas City. There's 5 stadiums I haven't been to, and so I'm hoping, well, this year or next, to knock that off my list. And that's been a goal. It's funny, I've had that goal for over 30 years to see every Major League Baseball stadium. They keep closing the ones down and building new ones. That's the problem. So.
And would any of this be possible without real estate?
Yeah, and there's no way. Honestly, Irwin, like I would have still made it happen and seeing some of the stadiums, but certainly if you've only got two vacation weeks a year or three vacation weeks a year and you're on a tight budget, you just couldn't do it. And it was one of these things, guys, that there was no aha moment day where all of a sudden, like, it just was, it's that slow drip, and your net worth goes up a little bit more. And actually, something that I always like to tell people that they should do is to do a net worth analysis. It doesn't matter where it's sitting at right now, but if your net worth analysis is, I don't care if it's $10 or negative 100,000 or $1 million or whatever, but literally look at every credit card, every debt you've got, and put that into one category. Like, and you say, oh, I know I'm going to pay off that MasterCard in 3 weeks. I don't care. Timestamp it for as of this day that you're doing this project, what is in your bank account to the dollar. I actually had a piggy bank that I used to count how many dollars I had in there just to add up my total amount of assets. So you take all your assets, all your negatives, your liabilities, and there's your net worth for the day. Well, that's interesting. But what if a year from now that number is up 100 grand or $500,000 or something like that because of the steps that you've done over that year? Like, yeah, that's life changing. And that's what happened with real estate. It was an aha moment for us. Is we thought we were doing okay, but I did my net worth analysis a year later, and my net worth had gone up about $650,000 in 1 year. And honestly, if you'd have told me to bet, I would have said, oh, a couple hundred grand maybe. And all of a sudden, I was up over 600 grand in a year. And that's when you realize that the steps you've done in the past has really made some positive differences. And now, if you see a net worth increase of $1 million, sort of say, oh, okay, that's cool. but it's when it went up from zero to, like, I had a net worth 15 years ago, or maybe 20 years ago, of 100 grand. That was my net worth, and that 99% of that was my home, and then it just increased.
But also, I'm sure you've asked this question to folks before. What's your best investment been? It's almost always it's their home. And then I always
Yeah,
say, I wish you had two.
Yeah, and I'm going to give you a more lame traditional answer than that. Is honestly, the time I spent in education was my best investment. And I know that's a lame answer, but it really is.
Wait. What education though? Were you taking philosophy? Were you
Good
taking like
question.
art studies?
Learning how to build money, build wealth. That was so big of a deal. And yeah, you're absolutely right. I talk to these literate people that read. They sort of mock me because they're reading like a fiction book every week and a half, and they say, "Oh, the movie was good, but the book is so much better." Like, everyone has those friends that are talking about that, and so like, I don't read nearly as many books as what everyone else reads, but the ones that I have been life changing, and I've taken action. And honestly, I wrote the book for the person who reads 5 books a year or less. I've included examples that I understand because I'm not a very smart person. I've included illustrations of cartoons and caricatures and all sorts of fun things because I want it to be entertaining. Because, like, honestly, like, for anyone who's ever been on one of my investment real estate tours, I'm a bit of a comic when it comes to, like, I want to entertain people. And so I wrote the book for that purpose alone, was just to entertain people. And if, oh, by the way, they learned how to build some wealth along the way, then even better.
Amazing. Amazing. Oh, can you recommend some of those books or education programs?
Yes, absolutely. The first thing I would always advise is every city that you're even considering investing in, look at the local meetups in that area. There are some of the best investment clubs. I think in Ontario, we've got an embarrassment of investment groups out there. And I think it all started with the Real Estate Investment Network here in Canada. They were sort of the granddaddy of them all. That's where both you and I both got our education was through that. And then because of that, groups like iWin, in my market, the Durham market, there's the Durham REI. Rockstar does some great programs as well. Keyspire, I've actually taken their course and it was very positive. Good education, but honestly, a lot of these guys all got their same education from Don Campbell. It's amazing how one one group has sort of spurred everyone else. And the Right Club in KW area, I've been to a number of their classes, and they're very good as well. So I'm not going to necessarily pick one or two groups. I think that's, but start to interact with other people. And if you're like me and my high school friends from not that many years ago, or I guess it was a ways now, but it doesn't feel like it. If I'd have stayed with my same circle of friends and only interacted with those people, I'd probably have a net worth and a situation, a station in life very similar to where they are today. But by hanging around with people like Irwin and some other superstars in the industry, all of a sudden you started rubbing shoulders with guys that were just at another level. And like I remember one year where I'd actually bought 3 investment properties in one year, and some of my friends were almost mocking me. Say, "Oh, sure, I bet you bought another property now, didn't you?" And they weren't being insulting, but they were sort of saying, "Oh yeah, being a hotshot." Well, I go to my
They're trying to bring
investment
you
club.
down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I go to my investment club meetings, and they'd clap and they'd applaud and they'd high five you. And then they'd sort of say, "Okay, what are you doing next month then?" Say, "Come on, guys, I just bought 3 properties." Or even if you buy one property every 2 years, 3 years, you're ahead of 99% of your friends, I'm sure. And just hanging around with some of those guys, in my mind, was all the difference in the world. And yeah, there's some great investment books. I think Rich Dad Poor Dad was a huge game changer in my life in terms of mindset. Don Campbell, his books, 97 oh, geez, I just lost it now. You probably know it. 97. I look behind me. The Canadian Real Estate Investment, anyway. So, but that's a huge one as well. And actually, one of the problems I always had is just like most of us, is I was always saying, "Oh, I'll do it myself. I'll do it myself. I'll do it myself." But books like the 4-Hour Work Week with Ferris and other books from that standpoint of just sort of learning how to delegate and get rid of the jobs I don't want to do and focus on wealth building, that was a game changer for me as well. So, but yeah, so did I answer your question? That's all right. I kind of rambled.
No, that's great. Yeah, local knowledge, can't really beat it.
Yeah.
Hanging out with people that do and have, rather than people who just talk.
Yeah. Take action. Action takers. Yep.
Awesome. Michael, so we're over time. Thank you so much for being so generous with your time.
Yeah, it was
Any
fun.
final thoughts you want to share with the listener?
Well, again, I'm a pretty simple guy and a simple message. I really think that no matter what you do, the people that win in this game are the ones that actually take action. And if you can do your research and do your homework and really understand what's where you're at right now, it doesn't matter where you are. But if you start taking action, whether it's a year or 3 years from now, if you can actually get there and actually start investing in actual assets that appreciate in value and actually cover their expenses, the difference you're going to make in your life in 3 years and 5 years and 10 years is going to be life changing. And so really that's what my book's all about is again, for the person who's got 37 properties and buys more properties than I change underwear, this maybe isn't for you. There might be a couple of tips that are cool, but it's for the guy who's looking for that first, second, and third to change their life and change the fortunes of where they're going.
Awesome. And then, Michael, where can folks get the book?
Yeah, so we have a website, Armchair Real Estate Millionaire .com. It's funny to say this, it's available on Amazon. Right now, it's depending on when this comes out, it's the launch date is May 11th. So you can pre-order the book today. It's also available on Kindle and other ebook versions as well. But yeah, it's I think you'll enjoy it. That's been the feedback I've been getting from a lot of people is that, I don't like reading a lot of wealth books because they're boring. I'd like to think, even if you don't learn anything, I hope that I made you laugh a couple times. And if I could do that, that's half the battle. So.
Amazing. And then where can people follow along? You're not big on social media.
I'm actually, I'm being coached. So actually, I just last week formed a Armchair Real Estate Millionaire is now got or it's author Michael Dominguez is what is what my Facebook page is. I've been doing Twitter and I just joined Clubhouse yesterday, so I'm going to become a Clubhouse person apparently, and that's really what I'm going to be doing. Instagram hasn't been my thing, but I'm going to try to do some stuff there. But yeah, I think if you go on my website, you'll see where my links are at that time. But I'm going to really try to. That's something, honestly, Erwin, you've been a superstar in that stuff, and I kind of look at you with a bit of envy with that. You're good at that. It's not natural for me to do that stuff. So I'm more of a one-on-one kind of guy. So
Awesome. Hey, you just try to do everything. Just do what you can.
yeah,
Get started somewhere. Start doing some TikTok dances and stuff.
Nobody wants to see that. Trust me, nobody wants to see that. So,
Amazing,
right.
Michael. Thanks so much for doing this. Hey,
Thank you.
come do a golf lesson. That's what I've been offering. That's what I'm asking people instead of doing a playing. Go do a golf lesson together.
I will take you up on that, and yeah, I'd like to get out there in Hamilton area and hang out.
Awesome. Oh, we'll actually do it in Oakville, so it's not so far for you to drive.
Sounds good.
Awesome.
All right.
All right. Thanks, Michael.
Cool.
Have a good weekend.
Goodbye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.